Good evening, everyone. We welcome you here to the Planning and Zoning. We appreciate your attendance. The July the 19th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of the City of Longview is now called to order. At this time, Heath Chamberlain, if you'll join us, please stand for the prayer and the pledge.
Bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to come together and serve in this capacity. We thank you for the city that we live in, the state, and this country, and we just humbly ask for your guidance on our decisions tonight, and that we would make decisions that are to the best for this city, dear God, and we just we pray for that divine wisdom. All these things we ask in your heavenly name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting in June. Has all the commissioners had time to look over the minutes? If you have, I will entertain for a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition say no. We've now reached the citizen comment portion of the meeting. The portion of the citizen comment are where we have comments made other than public hearing items. If it's on the public hearing, we ask that you wait to speak either for or against that. But if you wish to speak on just citizen comment at this time, please approach the microphone, state your name and the address for the public record.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Van Imeren. My address is 2714 Timberwood Trail. Talking about the property that Mr. Srinivasan is going to develop for townhomes.
I think your item, it'll be during the regular agenda. Do you want to speak at that time, sir, or would you like to speak right now?
I'm sorry, I thought that was now.
Oh, no, it's later on.
In that case,
Yes, sir.
let me sit back down.
Okay.
Yeah. No, this is the public comment. That's not the citizen comment on any of the agenda items. We're now on the consent agenda items. The items on the consent agenda are plats that meet the requirement of the City of Longview subdivision ordinance. They will be approved with one vote unless any member of the Planning and Zoning Commission or anyone in the audience or any applicant would like for it to be removed and placed on the regular agenda. Would anyone like any item removed from the consent agenda? I see none, so I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passed. Now on to the regular agenda. The purpose of the meeting is to hear all testimony for those in support and in opposition to the application before the commission. Tonight is the first of two public hearings to approve a change in zoning. The commission also considers plats. The procedure for the public hearing items to be followed. First of all, we will have the staff report. After the staff report, we have the applicant. And then after the applicant, the general public, those that want to speak in support or opposition are asked to come and speak. If you're part of a large group, we ask that you please get a spokesman, and when addressing the commission, be sure that you state your name. Also, speak into the microphone pretty loudly, because the chairman of the commission is pretty hard hearing. Anyhow, after each one of the public hearings is closed, then we'll vote on the request. Zoning request and the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations will go forward to a second public meeting, which will be by the City Council in August. We're now to item A of the regular agenda. Angela, will read this caption, please.
Yes, sir. A public hearing will be held to consider application Z22-18 filed by Arun Srinivasan requesting a rezone from Plan Development 15 to Townhome Zoning District for approximately 2.439 acres of Abstract 258 PP Range Survey, Tract 24 and 25-01, Section 7, situated east of Northwood Court, west of Patio and Greenleaf Street. And I'll go into my staff report. The applicant is requesting a rezone of this property located here off of Greenleaf Street, as I stated earlier, west of Patio. Currently, the property is actually in a planned development, and the applicant is requesting to rezone this property to Townhome Zoning District. The applicant would like to develop a neighborhood for townhomes. Greenleaf is classified as a local roadway and is maintained by the city of Longview. This development is appropriate along this roadway as long as access management is followed. Staff does find the proposed zoning change is consistent with our comprehensive plan and adjacent uses. Therefore, it does not constitute spot zoning. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions at this point?
I have one, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
In looking at the plat, it shows that the road does not go all the way through there.
That is correct.
That's correct? So it's
Yeah.
really a dead end,
Yes, sir.
and they would be building a road to meet that dead end, correct?
It appear, based on what the
looked
preliminary
at.
drawings, he's actually going to do a cul-de-sac, so it will not tie the two green leaves together.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have a question at this time? Of Angela. If the applicant is present, if they'd come forth, also state your name and your address and make your presentation, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Arun Srinivasan. I reside at 104 Fountain View Circle here in Longview. I'm here to answer any questions if y'all might have on this.
Any of the commissioners have a question of the applicant? See none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll open the public hearing part of it. Anyone who would like to speak in favor of this? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak against it? We have 4 speaker cards, if any of you'd like to come forward at this time.
You got my name and address?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So I don't know that I'm speaking against, but I have questions that I'd like answered, if you would, or if Mr. Srinivasan could. First of all, I'm curious to know what it means to rezone from planned development to townhome. What is the difference between those two zoning rules?
So a plan development is very site plan specific, and this plan development was a very old plan development, and it was actually a plan development for retail and multifamily, and so he's rezoning out of it, and it was. I'll go back to the zoning map and kind of show you. If you see all of that green, it was a plan development for general retail and multifamily, and it was a very old plan development that was approved in the 70s. Okay. And so with that, any type of plan development is very site plan specific, so it has to be approved by Planning and Zoning Commission and Council, or you can rezone out of it. In this case, it makes a little bit more sense to rezone out of it into Townhome Zoning District.
Okay. I'm not quite sure my question was answered as to what the difference is between the two and why it needed to be rezoned from planned development to townhome, but I don't know, that may be beside the point.
So with planned development zoning district, it's very, like I said, it's very like the plans have to be approved by planning and zoning and city council, so it does have to go through this process. So even if it's still within the planned development, say he decided to keep it within the planned development, he would still have to go before this process.
Yeah, we don't
and
have a
so,
site plan for that.
yes, and we don't have a site plan for this
Okay.
planned development.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
No, that's fine, thank you. So the property itself being developed for these townhomes, maybe you haven't been out there, but there is a severe elevation difference between where the property would go through to Greenleaf and where there is a creek at the far end of that property. So I'm curious to understand how that land would be developed or leveled, I'm assuming, to allow for townhomes to be built, especially in that back section. The reason I'm asking is because of that creek abutting my property, I'm wondering if the creek is going to be affected by that development to where it adversely affects my property or starts to erode my property because of some shift in the flow of the creek.
Arun, would you like to answer that? Oh, can you come to the microphone, please?
Yes, we understand that there is a creek, and the way we planned this, and because of that severe elevation difference, most of the development is going to be closer towards the street and try to utilize the high ground and not necessarily encroach into the creek. It is a substantial drainage zone, and most of the development, or all of the development that we're doing over here, should all be draining to the street and back onto Greenleaf. None of that should go back towards the drainage pattern that's on the back.
How are
So
you
they-
gonna do that? Get that high enough to go that way?
It is high enough already, so we don't intend on changing any of that elevation. Try to keep it to where it's all draining towards Greenleaf.
Okay, so you're not going to build up any more property going back towards that creek? You're going to use the current elevation as it is?
That's correct.
I don't know how you can do that.
Ma'am, if you're going to speak, please approach wait until he finishes and then come to the microphone.
So I answered both, I had two questions there, so I answered both of them. I'm curious to know if anybody can answer this as to what this development is going to do to my property values or the property values of the nearby houses. Can anybody answer that? Does anybody know? Want to take a guess?
You know, if you don't live in a townhouse, it shouldn't, because that wouldn't be correct. If they looked at a single-family home, they're not going to go, okay, well, what are the townhomes going for in this area? It shouldn't affect your property value at all.
Well, most of the homes in that street I live on and on Patio, I believe, would be designated as townhomes. At least that's what they're recalled.
Yeah, those would, from a zoning standpoint, we would call them, they're sort of townhomes, they're garden homes. The ones Mr. Srinivasan is proposing is attached townhomes, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
And
sir.
that's really the difference is, townhouse is attached, whereas the garden patio home is very similar, but it's not, doesn't share a common wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as far as densities and so forth, they're very similar.
Okay. And just to be sure I understand this correctly, even if the creek is not being affected, does anybody know if that creek would be designated as water of the state?
That I'm not sure of.
So, as I read Texas Water Code, water in the state means groundwater, percolating otherwise, and it includes creeks in that statement. And all of the bodies of surface water, natural or artificial. So I don't know where that water is coming from, but it's constantly flowing. So I'm just curious as to whether or not anybody would look into that to determine what it is.
Yeah, and our city engineer, part of the review process is he would be looking at, what would be required, making sure that our drainage ordinance is applied correctly.
And I'm assuming that the ordinance would meet waters of the state requirements.
Yes.
Okay.
And those plans have to be approved prior to building, right?
That is
Correct.
correct.
And would we see those plans? Would the neighbors see those plans? Would they be available for public viewing?
Sure, they'd be available for public viewing. They would not require public comment.
Okay. And I believe somebody answered the question about Greenleaf would not be extended all the way through. There would be a dead end there.
That is correct.
Okay. And Mr. Noon answered my last question, so that's all I had. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Anyone else like to speak in opposition, please approach the mic. State your name, your address.
Okay, I'm Mary Corbett. I live at 1288 Brandywine. I own 2709 Patio, so it's affected. My question is, I am very concerned about the elevation thing. 09 butts up directly in the middle, near where it drops off. I know exactly how sloped that is. And I just don't see how they can could you go to the number? I was thinking like maybe they put a couple, like for that first and second, but that third and fourth, the two to the right, I just don't see how they can do that. Has no one looked at it? No engineer gotten out there and looked at the elevation? I mean, I really don't see how you have room for that.
I mean, Mr. Srinivasan is an engineer.
Yeah, and the city engineer's not reviewed any engineering plans. Rezoning is just the first step to give them authorization to move forward and do any of the entitlements or take the next step and really prepare more detailed engineering plans. From a locational standpoint, which is just strictly lines on a piece of paper, it meets our minimum requirements for townhouse development, what he's proposing or what he's showing for reference. And this is just for reference because he's asking to rezone to townhome zoning. So it may look different than this. This is just what he's got for reference. As long as it meets the minimum requirements for that zoning is what we would approve. And so as far as lot size, building separation, building density, and like I said, this is just for reference to show that it can be done. Final product may look a little different.
Perhaps they can't get all 4 units in there.
Possibly, but I think they're probably far enough along to know that what the four units would work. As far as getting the cul-de-sac in there and getting the right spacing, setbacks, and everything that the city requires, at least on paper it fits. Now that's, when they start doing the dirt work and all of that, making sure that works. That's where the next step, when he prepares his more detailed engineering plans, that's where he'll make that final determination. But I'm assuming that they've done some preliminary to know that it'll work.
I have a question. How big? 2-bedroom, 2-bath, right?
3-bedroom, 2 baths.
3 square footage of each unit?
We're not sure yet on the details, but that's what we're shooting for, is 3 twos. Again,
Like 1,200 feet or what?
it'd definitely be 1,200 square feet.
At least 1,200?
At least 1,200 square feet.
But you're going to put 3 bedrooms in 1,200?
It'd be 3-bedroom, 2 baths. The square footage of it has not been determined, like Michael mentioned. We still have to go through the dirt work, the analysis part of it, to figure out how big of a unit we can fit in there.
Okay, so that's like the maximum, that's the optimum right there, what you're proposing there.
Correct.
Okay. What type of privacy fencing are you planning on? Because, all these houses are very close together, and privacy fencing is very important when you have that kind of density. What are you planning on doing for that?
I'm sure whatever we do would meet city's code requirements.
So the
on
city of Longview, because it's single family to single family, we are not going to require any fencing.
See?
So
what are you going to do about that?
that. Typical privacy fencing would be 6 feet tall, and we're going to be mindful of the homeowner, so there would be a 6-foot fence that goes around it to separate the units.
Okay. So, now, I have seen a photo
Speak in the mic, please.
I'm sorry. I drove by Lakeshore where I was told that you had two units that you're going to pattern these after, same size and everything.
Yes, ma'am. Or at least that's the plan.
And they're concrete and very modern looking, and I like the architecture of that. I
Thank you.
did. The size, 3 bedrooms in 1,200 just seems a little crazy, though. Oh, yeah, and how big, are you gonna have a backyard to these units, or are they just gonna be up front?
They're going to be up front, and the backyard would be whatever is not usable. It would end up being all of that backyard, because there's a big chunk of that land that could not be used, just because of the drainage
Exactly.
way that gentleman
Right.
mentioned.
Yeah.
So they would be very
Anybody else
small
have a
backyards.
question you want me to ask?
I did.
Okay.
I want to know if
Can you come to the microphone, please?
She didn't do a card.
I don't have a card.
That's all right.
It's okay.
I'm just going to
Yeah.
describe it more.
We'll get you to fill that out and we'll take it. when
All
you're
right,
done.
I got a blank card. I just wanted to know if there's going to be a restriction as far as the type of townhome. Is it going to be for the disadvantaged? Is it going to be a certain income? Or what
City
kind of
can't regulate
restriction?
that.
Yeah, we-
Yes?
The city
can't
cannot regulate that.
Okay, can he?
He can with deed restrictions,
Okay,
but
but we
the
won't
city
know
can't
that?
enforce them.
We won't know that before it's built.
Correct.
Also, I live on Patio. I'm at 2710 Patio, and I'm really not affected as far as this side of the street. Mine's on the other side of the street. But Patio, I don't know if you've been down Patio. Patio is one of those streets, it's a very narrow two-lane street. Greenleaf is a very narrow two-lane street coming into Patio. We get lots of traffic because of the Montessori school. I'm surprised that Montessori school's not here. Maybe they don't care, but anyway, we care because we get the brunt of the traffic coming through from Blue Ridge up Patio, taking that shortcut, and because of the Montessori school, and this is going to cause even more traffic. It's just a concern to me. We have pets, we have children, and they run down Patio, plus we get the drift of the people that are in the Montessori school that are waiting in line.
Ms. Corbett, do you have anything else?
I think I've covered everything. I didn't make the list.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, committee. I'm Keith Huddleston. My wife and I live at 1828 Northwood Court, and we own the land that is where Greenleaf stops. There's the privacy fence there. We own the lots but behind our house, and then our neighbor Gary Thompson. And then there is a small lot on Greenleaf that has an open creek. If you look at the demographics of the land and all, I'm not sure it's shown up here, but both I and my neighbor, we can testify that when big rains come, since the city does not have drainage in that area, that open creek becomes a very moving creek. And if this natural drainage, which is actually ruining my land that's there because it keeps digging in, and it just has the small type riverbed, the land's up here and it's cut in about like this, and that keeps cutting in to my land because there's not a drain at the end of Greenleaf that the city's put in to take care of that water. So what's happened is, and my concern is what the development's gonna do for that open creek, because what's happened is when we really get big rains and the soil is already wet, it doesn't drain properly. It comes up over the curb at my neighbor's house. It washes under his fence, which causes damage to his yard property. Hadn't so far damaged the house, but then we're next door, and so then we get that gully wash of rain too. And my big concern is changing we have trouble as it is, and my concern is what's it gonna be like after all that land that's behind my property, all of that is changed because it cuts through all of that. I've walked the property many times. I'm a country guy and I like to go out walking, and it's a extremely steep incline, and I'm just curious as to what will it do to my land where that drains already, and then with possibly impeding the drainage past my land, what is that going to do to my land and then Gary's land? So that's one of my big concerns. And I know I talked to a neighbor that's been there longer than I have, and she remembers, she's right past the creek, And she remembers a time when it's flooded to the point that it came up to her deck. So she's concerned she couldn't be here. And that may be hearsay to y'all, but anyhow. it's a
Is your
concern.
property in the flood zone?
No. Well, it may be,
None of this property is in the flood zone.
Okay.
but is,
I did check.
And just for clarification, your property is the one that has the fence across
Right.
Greenleaf? Are you on the north or the south side?
I don't know north and south. Gary, what am I? I'm on the north side of him.
Okay.
There's a map on the screen, can you describe where it is?
Oh.
Are y'all trying to figure out where Mr. Huddleston's
Oh,
property
my
is?
name's up there.
His is, if Greenleaf goes all the way across, you see where the
Right
arrow
there.
is? That's where his property is.
Yeah, so I own this, and then that back there that goes down to the creek, and then our home is up here, it's kind of in the shade.
I'm sorry. Did y'all hear that? Do I need to say it again?
I actually heard that, and I don't know, does he need to repeat it?
So the land that's gonna be, they're requesting to change, is that a flood zone?
It is not.
It is
It
not.
is not in the floodplain.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else
So,
to say.
so none of this area is in the flood zone, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll pass the mic. Somebody wants to.
You have anything else, Mr. Huddleston?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
I
If you'll put the
appreciate-
mic back on the stand there.
I appreciate y'all letting us comment.
I've got a copy of some stuff. Hello, my name's Gary Thompson, and I live on 1826 Northwood Court, and which is where Greenleaf on the west side of this property, where it dead ends, where it says Thompson, Gary, and Betty Ann right there. That's where I live. And Keith kind of preempted what I had to talk about, and and of course the city's been out there to look at some drainage issues. When it rains, it really pours, and it'll come across the curb into my yard, through my backyard into his yard. Anyway, that little creek just doesn't get the water out sometimes. I printed off with I went and got a topographical map of this area, and then I did a hand map that shows the elevation drop, and it does drop 24 feet from over there on the east side where this development's gonna be, where that pig trap is, or at the southwest corner of that parcel. It drops 24 foot from there back to the creek. So it doesn't come back to Greenleaf. I think maybe that's what you said, that it drains back to Greenleaf.
The terrain definitely drains to the back, but the development that we're putting in is going to be on top of the hill, getting them to drain towards Greenleaf.
Okay. And of course, there's an oil field, there's the gas pipeline there. Y'all are aware of that. That really hadn't been mentioned, but there's a 50-foot variance there. And if you'll click back to the his proposed placing of the units there, I think that small rectangle shows it's called a pig trap, what the oil field calls it, right there. But there's a 50-foot variance, which is 25 foot on each side, nothing can be built on. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess another question I have is, and it's really doesn't matter. What I'd like to do is give each one of y'all a copy of what I've done. And one of the things that, you can give that to everybody, and I can walk you through what I've done. And I'll let y'all all. This is from the state water code, and basically what it says is any surface water runoff, creek, whatever you want to call it, you can't dam it up, you can't change the course of it, you can't do anything. Basically, a creek is a creek. Now, if y'all want to tell me how that would be remedied, or if you would like to, because you can't just fill them in and go on about your business. Any ponding or anything that prevents this water flowing, if it was to back up and come back onto Greenleaf and across the street and into my yard and flood my house, that would be someone else's liability. Is that correct, based on what this is?
I can't speak on behalf of whose liability it'd be, but, I mean, part of the city engineer's review is gonna be to ensure that it meets all the city codes and doesn't create a drainage issue per our drainage guidelines.
Yeah, well, it just can't be, it's got to keep that level drop. And on that page 2 there is, I, of course, kind of filled in the elevations, and those are based on those topographical maps that I got. And so I plugged in the values there. So 332 is down there where the creek is, 356 is up top. And the creek at the back runs straight across on the north side of the property, and this other one runs from the southwest right up through the middle. And that concerns me, that if anything, and I don't know how to throw a video up here, but I got a couple of videos when it was raining, and it's just like creeping into my house just about before. So I'm concerned about, because the runoff on that comes around this corner. Angela, can you put that to where it shows a big map of
The aerial?
the whole area? There you go. But if you look up Northwood Court, you can go up about 6 lots, and everything's on a downward, and there's no drain box on the right-hand side if you're heading north. So everything comes around that corner. That's where all the water is. And supposedly we're going to get some work done to relieve some of that. Don't know. But as it sits right now, when there comes a real nice rain, it ponds up real quick at the end of my street, where Greenleaf dead ends into on that west side where I live. And that's kind of it in general, what I have on my mind. I'm concerned about the water runoff and possible flooding. If there's any levees or any dirt pushed around, any creeks, this other diagonal creek that's filled in, it's just it'll just back up into my way. And the elevation differences aren't that much, and all it would do is cause me to get flooded. And I didn't know, well, these houses, townhomes, will they be for sale, or are you gonna lease them, or?
We haven't made a determination on that yet, so it could be for sale or for,
Will lease homes be handled separately, or is that allowable?
We can't regulate it. I mean, the zoning is single, it's townhome, so each.
So this isn't single-family zoning?
It is a type of single-family zoning. It's just that the homes are attached, so they have a common wall.
Like a duplex?
It looks like a duplex if you look at it from street value, but there's a property line that goes down the common wall. And so they could be sold individually.
Okay. What about, what are your plans on the west side of your property? Are you gonna leave any trees up there, or are you gonna clean it all out?
much of the drainage way would be left as is, just because of all the concerns that we've been talking about. It is not, just from an engineering standpoint, it doesn't make any sense for us to fill in the creek and impede the flow.
No, I'm not talking about that back creek. I'm talking about that diagonal creek that I drew out on there.
Yes, sir. So none of that creek would be impeded. It's definitely not in our best interest to impede any creek for the development itself. So what's natural would end up staying as natural as it can be,
Okay.
and still, accommodate the development we're talking about.
So from what you just said, that diagonal creek will not be disturbed? Is that the way y'all hear it, guys? Okay, helps me out a whole lot. Let me see if I got anything else here. Any questions of me? Okay. Is that?
Thank you.
I'm sorry it's old fashioned, it's just on paper, but it works. But sometimes it works. Thank you.
Approach the microphone, please.
I'm Keith Huddleston, 1828 Northwood Court. You indicated that the city engineers would be, I guess, in on the planning for the drainage and all.
Mm-hmm.
And all I've got to say is the city engineers haven't done anything yet on the drainage problem that we have, and I guess it's been overlooked for years and years and years. And so even though you say that, I'm still concerned.
Sure.
Because I know Gary and I have been talked, and
Yeah, and
we hear there's plans, and
It
it's
gets
gonna.
very difficult too when we're trying to correct a drainage issue that's been created over time by private development. You know, as far as the development that's occurring here, they'll review it and make sure that it complies. But the other situation is caused by a number of different factors that are really out of the city's control.
Okay. Well, that's our big concern.
Thank you. We have one more speaker card, Ms. Fleet.
Someone else asked one of my questions already,
Okay.
so I'm good.
Does anyone else have any questions of? Yes.
Mr. Shirley, you talked about the city engineers looking at plans and approving the plans. How will we be made aware of when those plans have been reviewed, or do we need to go somewhere to find that out?
No, generally, once the zoning is the only opportunity or requirement for a public hearing or public comment period. So once zoning is approved, if plans are submitted and comply with city rules, it's all administrative review and approval. Now,
Okay.
they're subject to viewing under open records,
Sure.
but there's no notification requirement.
Okay. Can you give me a time frame? Okay.
No, it's just whenever the developer submits them.
Okay.
But you can always come to our office, feel free,
Okay.
and if you want to look at them, we'd be happy to show them to you. Yeah, just give us a call and we'd be happy to show them to you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Would the applicant like to address any of these concerns or speak?
Nothing specific to address, sir, unless there's any other questions, but I think I feel like I've addressed most questions, and like Angela and Michael mentioned, this would go through a review with the city and make sure it's in compliance with what the city's codes and ordinances are. Definitely not going to be something that's going to cause a negative impact to any of y'all's property. That's going to be rest assured.
And I wanted to clarify too, because I think one of the comments, and I don't know if it was understood about one of the creeks, if you're looking at this site plan, I believe if you look at the contours, the question was, this is where that existing creek is, and it's where the new homes would be, this townhouse would be placed. So Ren, I think that was the question that the gentleman was asking, is what were you going to do about this creek? Because it looks like on your site plan, that one will be impacted by the development.
This is a very preliminary drawing, the way we've drawn it up, and the most recent version that we have, like one of them rightly mentioned, that pipeline is a 50-foot right-of-way. When we did this during our preliminary review, the gas company had told us that it's only a 30-foot right-of-way, so I think this map still shows a 30-foot right-of-way, but that's not true. It's a 50-foot right-of-way, so a lot of that's been shifted and reshuffled. And so from a development standpoint, it's going to be in our best interest to stay on top of the hill as much as we can and not have to come back and do a lot of dirt work or additional fill in there. So It might, just behind those houses, we might change the contours just a little bit, but the general drainage pattern still ends up going to the northeast of that property. And so we definitely don't plan or intend to change the drainage course or the way the existing watershed is. We don't plan to change any of that.
It certainly, and I think if you read what they've presented in the water code, if they do change it, it would just have to carry the water, and that's what our engineer would look like. They can't basically do away with it if they did, and we see that from time to time with development where they may move it over a little bit, but they design it in such that it's going to carry the water that it did before, and it's not going to create more of a problem. And just to kind of recap, as I'd stated before, this is not exactly what this is just strictly for reference purposes. So, you know, and as Arun stated, it's probably going to shift, and this is probably the most you can get. This doesn't mean that that's what the end product's going to look like. So
That's
just
correct.
remember, if we move forward with an approval, we're not approving this footprint. This is strictly for reference. We're approving
The zoning
conceptual
change.
zoning. Yeah.
Any other questions, commissioners?
A quick question. Because was raw land before, and I'm sure it's good for you to hear all the drainage issues now before you develop, do you think it would be in everybody's best interest? Do you think the drainage would get better because you have to design a plan to make sure that the drainage is proper for the city code?
I don't know if it's going to get better, but I can tell you that it's not going to get any worse, for sure, because like stated before, the intent is to develop on top of the hill, and the hill, it's kind of, again, it's a little muddled with the way we have this shown just for the reference purpose, but the hill generally all drains towards Greenleaf, and it's all going down Greenleaf. So the proposed development would try to keep the existing contours and try to utilize what's out there to drain it towards Greenleaf. That's going to be in the best interest for us from a development standpoint. So the drainage in itself, again, it's going to be under review, and we're going to do what's compliant. Beyond which, definitely not impeding any water to cause any concerns for the neighbors, for sure.
If you approach the mic, or they can bring you a mic, either one.
This wasn't even mentioned earlier, where Greenleaf comes in from the east side. There is a lease road that goes to a oil and gas location there. Are we doing away with that lease road?
They'll still have to provide access to that area, so Mr. Srinivasan will still have to provide access.
Okay, I mean, that's, it wasn't even mentioned, so,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, anyone else have any questions? I see none. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion.
So moved. I'll second.
Is this for approval?
For approval, so.
You move for approval. We have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? It does pass. At this time, it concludes today's meeting. Someone do not forget about Heath, who's back in the back. We don't want to leave him there.
I'm good with telling you.
Let him know he's there, but this does conclude this meeting, so we are adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance.